But I was in Europe during the elections, and people there were very pro-Obama. I think, like in Holland, they were 90% of the people were pro-Obama, wanted him elected. And one thing that I told them is, like, America is a very young country, and you can never really count it out. And one thing that America is really good at is reinventing itself. And I knew that Obama was pretty much the only choice they had for that reinvention, which is actually why I really like the cover of your new movie with the mask on top of it. I mean, it really is kind of putting on a new face to the same old ideas. And he was the perfect person to do that. And it almost seemed, if something seems too good to be true, it usually is. I mean, I was thinking about that with the Madoff people and all the people working around him. It's like, okay, all this money keeps on coming in. It doesn't seem like it should happen, but now everybody's saying, like, oh, we didn't know what was going on. I mean, at some point, you have to trust your instincts. And if something, is too good to be true, then, you should question it. I think there's an obligation to question those things around you.
Well, that's the problem with this confidence game. Now all these good people and that's in the film, who believe they were repudiating Bush, like Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. He's a big conservative, but he said, you must vote for Obama. You must repudiate the crimes of Bush in the world's eye. But now that they're invested in Obama, they're getting hurt because they're having to admit that he's a fraud. But a lot of other Obama supporters, the Obama people, they can't admit they've been conned. And so suddenly they're like, well, we got to have troops over there, and we got to not give the detainees any rights. And, so what if he has lobbyists? And so what if there's all this corruption? So they've kind of bought into it now, like we saw with Mussolini or Hitler or other people. And that's the problem. Is Bush was a demonic little creature who couldn't sell used cars. Obama is slick and good looking and smart, and he can sell this agenda, this reinvention. And I think we're in deep, very deep trouble. Yeah.
Well, I mean, also this is going to sound silly, but the designer who made the Hope posters for Obama that were pretty ubiquitous and everywhere is the same guy who did Andre the Giant posters. And you remember the image of Andre the Giant?
Yeah,
and it was Obey. And I was looking at it going like, wow, Hope and his image kind of looks a lot like Andre the Giant and Obey. And I was looking at even the words Hope and Obey have very similar shapes to them. I mean, the letters are kind of moved around, but you can almost make Hope out of Obey. And of course that poster art is from, the Bolshevik Revolution.
No, they admit
like
that. Yeah.
So, I mean, that there was kind of a tip-off to me, too. Sort of.
But it's not even Time Magazine and others at the cover, we're all socialists now. This isn't socialism. Giving $9.7 trillion in 5 months to the banks with no strings attached and a few $100 billion to the people, that's not socialism, that's piracy.
Yeah, they're looting. It's looting is what's happening right now. And I mean, and that's what's happening all around. And people, they're so confused. I mean, even an educated person who's really following this stuff, it's hard to tell where this money trail is going. We're being told so many different things. It's just boggling, I think.
Shifting gears back into Rick Linklater and his new film, Orson Welles and Me, or Me and Orson Welles. You're getting it backwards. Do you think I hope this film is successful because it is his best work. Yeah, well, it's always a difficult thing. And, Rick's always been, he's a filmmaker who works on the margins as well. And, he's had success, but he's never been completely in the system. He lives in Austin, Texas. He makes the kinds of films that he wants to make. And you hope that gets rewarded. Well, no, I mean, this film is really good. It's a chick flick, but it's also a guy's flick. It's the perfect mix, and it's historical. The Mercury Theater and its opening day with Caesar. I don't know. I've seen so many films that try to repackage and give you a window into theater,
right,
and into Shakespearean theater, and a lot of them don't do it very well. I think Mel Gibson with Hamlet did.
Right.
This, I think, tops that. I mean, just the stylized nature, the way it's billed as fascist, and I think it fits in with the whole fascism we have today.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that it sort of transcends this whole notion of theater, too, because it's really about the creative process and what it takes to make something with a group of people. And it's about the creative process in general, which is what I really enjoyed about it.
Yeah, I don't want to give any spoilers, but folks, you need to see the film when it comes out in October. This is Rick Linklater's crowning achievement. We've got some of it up on screen from YouTube as well. I mean, this actor, he looks like Orson Welles.
Yeah, he talks like him, same delivery.
This guy's great, too.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Just amazing. You know, we've got about 15 minutes left in airtime, Tommy, and there's so much going on, so much happening. You were talking during the break about technology being a double-edged sword, and then we never brought that up.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, at the same thing, as much as I love listening to your show on my iPhone, it gives me that window, you know, while I'm biking around Amsterdam, you know, I also realize that it has a very sophisticated tracking system to it. You know, it records everything you do, every single call. I mean, and I worry about that. You know, it's kind of like, are you trading convenience for, you know, a lack of privacy or these other things? And it's always that sort of bait and switch that I'm really kind of cautious about. You know, am I being too lazy? And then in turn, you know, from that. But at the same time, it's like, how else can I listen to your show?
Well, we're being inserted into the Matrix while we fight the Matrix with the Matrix.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Matrix movie. That's how they're fighting the Matrix, is with the Matrix,
right,
jacking in. And I think that's where the establishment thinks they're going to win in the end, is that we're going to be lazy. But as long as we're aware of the double-edged nature of it, I think that they've miscalculated. And clearly, I think it's going to bring them down.
I think more and more people seem to be waking up. I mean, you know, you just watching my mom react to you the other night was a pretty amazing experience for me, and what a big fan she's become, you know, of you.
Well, that's thanks to you turning her on to the show, but
that's the way it happens. I mean, we share with our friends, and a lot of times, you know, I remember when we were actually friends before I started listening to your show. And I think for a lot of people, they're sort of resistant at first. When you're saying something that's so far outside of the mainstream and the party line, there's a natural tendency to resist those things. And I think after time and just sort of the repetition, and you start listening to things, like at first it's like kind of like, well, you know what, that kind of makes sense. Or, you know, how many times can you be, you know, fooled or you know, feel that like something else is going on that I'm not getting from the mainstream media.
Well, I talk about real things, and it's from my perspective, so there could be some distortion there, but I'm attempting to tell the truth. And when I talk about people then seeing their own lives.
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing I always tell people is that, like, nobody's right 100% of the time. You know, worst case scenario, if you're only right 10%, that is a scary thing. You know, that's 10% too much. So I think and I also think it's very patriotic to question those things around you and to, you know, look at what's happening around you.
How do you think it's going to end for Obama? I mean, I think they're going to pile all the corruption, all the corporate agenda on him and hang him out to dry, just like Bush, and then they'll bring the new puppet in. But he was kind of like their last shot. I agree with you that this is the only way they could reinvent themselves. This trick isn't going to work again. And Congress's approval rating is still down at 9%. He's got a high one, but nobody else does. I don't see too many more tricks in the bags. Stage terror attacks, wars, new politician phenomenons. I see the establishment coming to a crisis point.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is the dissolution of our nation. You know, who knows? I mean, it doesn't seem like that by the end of all this, if it keeps on following the current trend, who knows where it could end? You know, it could just completely collapse. And that's also the double edge of globalism. You know, I mean, there's other countries, you know, like China saying, like, we got to help these people out because they can't collapse because we have too much invested, you know, so it's really hard to tell where that is going to end.
Well, that was the globalist plan, is that as the dollar started falling, the world bought back into it because they were so invested in it,
right.
They had no other choice. But you can only hold people hostage so long.
It sort of sounds like a con game, too, doesn't it?
Oh, it is. The globalists brag. It's their big master plan.
Yeah.
They get all these countries dependent on each other, and then the globalists are above it, and they're outside the very laws they foisted on the nations. And so it's a world government of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
I mean, the very bankers that engineered the crisis are now using it to get even more power and control. And even if the general public isn't informed, at the very basic level, they know, wait a minute, a world government of, for, and by the bankers when they're the ones that did all this?
And it kind of seems like an old story, right? I mean, the bankers are the bad guys. I mean, we've seen it in the Bible. You know, we've heard it throughout history. We've been warned many times by our own presidents. So,
and it's because bankers create money out of nothing.
Yeah.
And then they get the world. People will kill for $100. They'll kill for a fancy car. They'll kill for a big house. And here's this class of bankers who issue it all and own it all and run it all just because they're able to do the magic trick and fool the public. It's a spell.
Yeah. And they enchant the public. It's literally an enchantment. And it's a bit of a shell game. I mean, it's always interesting when you think about how you read articles like 45% of the nation's wealth is destroyed. How is the wealth destroyed? How is it created? You know, I mean, Was it ever really there anyway, or was it just an illusion the entire time?
Well, that's it. They've made the whole world about their fiat currency and their fiat system, and then they tell us in 3 months we've lost almost half of our wealth, and it's dropping every week. But if you look at it, they're actually destroying the fiat wealth so that nobody can pay them off, so then they get the real wealth. That destruction of wealth, just like the Great Depression was engineered, and that's now on record, congressional testimony, was about blowing everything out so they can consolidate it. I know I'm like a parrot that just says that over and over again, but the public better figure that out, because until we arrest these bastards, they're not going to back off. I mean, it's either them or us.
Yeah, but also when you say that you're like a parrot and you keep on repeating these things, mainstream media repeats the same talking points over and over and over and over again, and that's what makes it so effective. You know, that you really are literally entranced by the television set, you know, by their talking points that go on. And anytime anything major happens, you see that again and again and again.
You know, that's the biggest wake-up point for people that I talk to just in the general public.